an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering 6 of Crows, the final chapters, brought to you by Megan. In this section, I had a feeling that they were going to get fucked over, but I wasn't ready for the fucking over to actually work. I thought they'd find a way around it. I am very excited, however, that this is setting up a whole other book, and I am very excited because somebody has already commissioned the first chapters of that other book. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha, and yes, so somebody commissioned actually another section of 6 of Crows, and when I checked it this morning, I realized, like, oh, this is going to finish off the book, the one that I have for today, actually. So I asked them if they wanted to start the next one, and they said yes, Crooked Kingdom. So that's cool. I'm going to be able to jump into that world right away. But yeah, guys, I wasn't ready for the depth of the fuckover that comes at the end of this section. Like I said, I anticipated that there was going to be some skullduggery. I figured that was on its way because they managed to turn around so many things that I had thought were the plan going terribly wrong that turn out to be either part of the plan or they're able to get around it. And I was like, all right, there's going to have to be some like big, because the main thing, to be honest, that I thought was that they were going to back out of the deal because it turned out that the actual person they wanted, Bolio Bayor, was already dead, and his son doesn't even know the formula for Jurda Parem. So I thought for sure that they would be like, well, if he's dead anyway, and this kid doesn't even know it, forget it. I'm not even going to bother. Because half the reason this deal had allegedly been made was because they were worried that Bolio Bayor was going to be messing up the markets, and if he's taken out of the equation entirely, then there's no reason to worry about the effect that he's going to have. So yeah, that winds up being not exactly the issue after all. It looks like Kaz got tricked, which is not an easy thing to do, but Kaz falls into the exact trap that he did when he was a child, which is falling for a con and window dressing, which is really a beautiful, like, story-wise, it's a really beautiful turn because it's heartbreaking and also, you know, exactly true of human nature. We think we have learned from our mistakes, and we don't always learn. We only have regret. We think that, oh, that'll never happen to me again. I've come such a long way. But the truth is, we become almost arrogant in thinking that we have it figured out now. And, you know, so, all right, let's begin, because this section, the whole last book part is 50 pages. It's just over 50 pages. It's like 55. And I just wasn't ready for this book to be over because I kept checking to see how much more was left, but I wasn't actually checking page numbers. So I really thought there was at least 2 more episodes. And so this section that's called Proper Thieves, Part 6, is the end of the book. We start off with Inej's chapter, and this is a lovely moment that I 100% fell for, where it turns out Inej being discovered and taken prisoner is all part of the plan. I loved it. This is like one of those tropes that I get better at seeing. Like, I've gotten better at seeing than I have in the past, but I definitely still fall for it, which is the prison is where he wanted to be all along, or this thing looks like it's a mistake, but it's actually part of the... I just tend to really like fall into it. And especially because I don't think of Inej as somebody who's good at acting. I figured if anybody is most likely to be caught, it's going to be her. Which is certainly part of, I think, why Leigh Bardugo chose Inej to be the main character for this particular part of the plan. She knows that our expectation is that Inej is not good at playing a role, and we expect more than anybody for her to be caught. So she'll do this and trick us more effectively because our expectations lie there. And I think that's what she was trying to do with Nina, because she was like, well, everybody expects Nina to be the best at being able to pass. And so I will have her be caught, and that will be a really big surprise. That one didn't really work on me because I saw the double meaning behind the conversation they were having, and I saw that coming a little bit more. But this whole thing with Inej, like, especially in regard to her going up against Helene, it's really like a fun trick that Bardugo has pulled off here, that everybody is in a lot of ways facing their worst fears and their oldest demons in this heist. So Inej runs into Tante Helene, and Nina runs into the head of the Druskill, Brom, whatever. And then we have Kaz, who actually like comes across Pekka Rollins, and Matthias is returning to his homeland and all of the people that he feels he betrayed and having to do it all over again. Jesper is like he's one of those that I'm still not really sure how I feel about. I think it's interesting that he turns out to be such a liability. And especially the way in which he's a liability, because I didn't know how much his particular weakness for gambling was going to factor into anything in the end. And it turns out the gambling is what leads them to being tipped off about some things indirectly. But yeah, Jesper has to wind up like fighting using his Grisha skills, which he has tried to hide his whole life. And then we have Wylan, who this whole deal is in the name of his father, which is, that whole thing is, let's not even go there yet, because there's a lot to talk about there. So yeah, everybody's sort of facing down the things they're most afraid of, and the things that can unnerve them and cause them to just completely fall apart the most easily. So Inej, especially because we already saw her run into Helene, and she did kind of fall apart when she ran into her in a very real way, as we know as readers. I just figured that was happening all over again. But it turns out this whole thing was orchestrated because they need a diamond in order to get through really tough Grisha-made glass. And she decides that she's going to take the diamond from around Helene's neck and in two ways deal a blow to her. Outwit her and take something that is particularly valuable and like a point of pride for that woman, which, let me just say, is wonderful and fantastic, and I love it so much. And there's a moment where she thinks to herself her only regret was that she wasn't going to get to see the moment when Helene realized her diamond was missing. Yup, same regret. Same exact regret, guys. I want to see that moment so bad. I just really need to get that satisfaction, because how beautiful. This woman thought that she had the measure of what was going on with Inej. This woman thought she had one-upped her a little bit, and then to fucking get turned around and, hey, bitch, no. Oh, y'all. it's hard for me to put into words how good little petty shit like that is for my soul. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I need it. It's my life's blood. It's like watering a plant. So yeah, I wish so much that we got to see that. And I'm really hoping that there's something that winds up happening where we do at least get to see like the aftermath of it, like her hearing what happened, or us running into her later and getting to see, like, getting to find out what her reaction was. I don't know, but I'm hoping. Although at the same time, if we never hear from her again, I won't exactly be sorry about that either. So anyway, I'm getting all over the place here. Inej is being led down this hallway where she's going to be put into a prison and then questioned. And they very purposefully speak in Kirch while they're describing the fact that she's going to be tortured in order to scare her. And she's watching these two guys and thinking to herself, I think I can take these two, and sort of prepping herself to make her move when two more guards show up. And she's like, fuck, I don't know if I can take 4. And she decides, well, if I don't do it, I'm going to be in that fucking prison cell. So I need to just take my risk. And she takes down one guy and the other raises his gun. And just as he begins to go for her leg, because she's like, well, you can't shoot me because you need information. You need to be able to question me. He's like, well, I can shoot you in the leg. Then all of a sudden, a pair of shears come like out of nowhere and get like lodge into his back. And it turns out that the two soldiers that she saw are actually Jesper and Wylan in their stolen uniforms, which is a really wonderful moment. I had forgotten that they were wearing those uniforms, so I forgot that that could be them. And I also love the fact that it's a pair of shears, which is such a like brutal, undignified weapon from like a horror movie. It's just fucking yikes, guys. So, did you manage to get hold of a big enough diamond? Jesper asked. Inej nodded and slipped the massive jeweled choker from her sleeve. Hurry, she said. If Helene hasn't noticed it's missing, she will soon. Jesper snatched the choker from Inej's hand, mouth agape. Kaz said we needed a diamond. He didn't tell you to steal Helene Van Houten's diamonds. So I enjoy the fact that he looks at this and knows exactly whose it is. Like, this is such an iconic piece of jewelry that he recognizes it on sight, which means that it is that much more meaningful that it was stolen. I love it so much. Helene had made it easy. During the scuffle in the rotunda, Inej had made sure that she was too focused on being choked to worry about being robbed. After that, all of Helene's attention had been devoted to gloating. Inej only regretted that she wouldn't be there to see Tante Helene discover her prized necklace was missing. So they bar the doors of this because they're inside this room that has like a piece of glass that blocks them from this area where they are storing a tank. I have to confess that this is a spot in the book where I'm not totally sure how to picture this room. All I know is that a piece of glass remains between them and this tank, and that they are able to bar the door to buy themselves time and bore a hole. Well, they don't bore a hole because that makes it sound like it's like a little drill hole. They slice a large round hole out of the wall of glass, and Inej has to basically launch herself through it and land on the tank and capture the tank. And she's, probably the only person who's like slender enough to get through and also dexterous enough to make it through the hole without slicing herself open and then land without injuring herself. But as they're cutting this hole, the guards are trying to get in the door, and they actually get a, what do you call it? What's the word? Guys, help me. Battering ram. That's what I want. So yeah, she goes through, and this is such a cool moment. She was running, her feet light, her silks like feathers. In this moment, she didn't mind them. She'd duped Helene Van Houten. She'd taken a little piece of her away, a silly symbol, but one she prized. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was a beginning. There would be other bawds to trick, slavers to fool. Her silks were feathers, and she was free. And then she leaps through. She heard the soft swish as the sharp glass rim sliced through the silks she trailed. She arced her body and reached. She would have only one opportunity to grab for the iron lantern that hung from the ceiling of the enclosure. It was an impossible leap, a mad leap, but she was once again her father's daughter, unbound by the rules of gravity. She hung in the air for a terrifying moment, and then her hands grasped the lantern's base. Behind her, she heard the door in the walkway burst open. Gunfire. So, she manages to get into a tank. Can we back up here for a second? I did not, we don't know most of the plan, as it turns out, when they go into this heist. There are lots of different pieces of it that we as readers are not privy to, which I'm fine with, for the record. I like that this is done in a way that simultaneously it feels natural to the reader, both because this is how you just want to experience something like this, but also because Kaz plays everything so close to the vest that we sort of accept as readers that we're being treated like the other members of his crew, where we are being given just enough that we can go into this without feeling like we have no idea what's happening, but we aren't given enough for us to think of ways they're going to handle things ourselves. It's a really nice sort of acknowledgement of the way he treats his people, and using that as a means of obfuscating things for your readers so that it's still really thrilling, and there are still a lot of twists with it as it all begins to unfold. So, on that note, I did not know they were getting a fucking tank, which is insane. It's insane. We need to just address, if I thought hurtling along in an underground river with balleens in your mouth to breathe was the craziest escape I'd ever heard of, this one definitely outstrips that one. The reason being that going down through this underground river is you're undercover for a lot of it. Literally, you're underground. People are going to assume that you probably couldn't make it out of there alive, so you would figure that, they drowned on the way and maybe make less effort to try and find them on the other end of things. And the whole, the way that it's employed is finding an escape route that nobody else would have thought of, which is underneath, a symbol of worship. So that's something that's sort of common, right? There are a lot of stories in which a really important religious spiritual symbol turns out to be a cover for something. So while I really liked that twist and I still didn't see it coming, once it was revealed, it wasn't too earth-shattering. This, however, they're stealing a massive piece of equipment and in full view of everybody, rolling on the fuck out of there, which is so gangsta, I don't even know what to say. They just go through the wall. They just go right the fuck through the wall. What? Oh, it's so satisfying, you guys, to just break through a wall that is famous for being impenetrable. It's pretty good shit. It's pretty good shit. So yeah, they're rolling out of there. Everybody's chasing them, trying to fire at them, but she's got all kinds of firepower on her side. Eventually, she's able to send what sort of sounds like a grenade launch up to the glass window that she just went through that little hole, and she breaks the rest of the glass down so that the other gentleman can drop down and join her. And Jesper knows how to drive the thing, and Wylan is out in the back using the gun. The whole thing is just so insane. And I love, Wylan clutched his middle, still snorting laughter, and pointed downward. Trailing behind them was a banner caught in the tank's treads. Despite the smears of mud and gunpowder burns, Inej could still make out the words, Stry macht Fjerden. Fjerden might. It's good shit. It really is. Also, I'd like to register my shock that a tank exists in this world, because I assume it runs on like gasoline or something, and I just didn't expect them to have vehicles like that. All we have seen throughout is carriages and wagons, stuff that's pulled by horses, right? So I didn't realize that this was something that that would exist, and I assume that it's just not common, and that's why it's being used for like military stuff, because it's really powerful, but it's not something that everybody can go out and buy. So, okay, then we go to Nina, and she is with Kuwei, who is the son of Bolyabayor, and Matthias and Kaz is in a bad way. He almost dies. Matthias manages to start him off on a CPR round, but is in the middle of each, like, pump on his chest being like, I should just let you die. Which, you know, I really understand. Like, Matthias just doesn't like or respect Kaz. But, I don't know. I feel like that respect is sort of starting. I feel like it's flickering to life. So, I love this moment a lot when Nina says, do you remember Kaz, the ice court, impossible heist, near death, 3 million Kruger waiting for you in GHAT-DAMN? Kaz blinked and his eyes cleared. 4 million. I thought that might bring you around. I love it. I love it. She uses his greed as the thing that, like, really gets him to focus again. That's like somebody being like, hey, why don't you just cheer up? I know you had a bad day. And me being like, screw you. And then they, like, you know, take the lid off of a plate of cupcakes. And I'm just like, oh, everything is wonderful again. So he gets resuscitated and is immediately up and moving again. The first one on his feet, like continuing on with the next part of the plan. And I like this. Nina shook her head, caught between annoyance and admiration. Maybe that was what it took to survive in the barrel. You could never stop. So they head up and they think that there is a tank about to, like, come down on them. And they are correct, but the tank is piloted by their good friends. I love this. Well, they ask Kaz what to do, and he says, wait. How about take cover? Nina asked, bouncing nervously from foot to foot. Have heart? I stashed 20 rifles in this convenient shrubbery? Give us something. And then it turns out that it's their friends, and they all climb in. Things seem really great. And then they get pursued by a lot of other tanks, which only seems to be a problem for a second. But then they cross over a bridge and shoot out the bridge behind them so that all of those other tanks can't follow. So it seems like a momentary problem. And I'm sitting here like, okay, they were able to overcome all of these little hiccups so easily. Something has to be wrong down at the harbor. Like either their ship isn't there, or it's going to look like everything's fine and they get to the ship and it turns out that it's been, like, taken over by somebody else and they have been caught after all, or something. But I did not expect what it actually turns out to be, which is basically the entire Fjerden army has, like, come out for this like ragtag crew and is standing there crowding, like, all the streets on the way, blocking their view. And there are also a lot of ships in the harbor. So yeah, I'm going to read this little part. The tank jolted to a halt, nearly flinging Nina from her perch. The key, I always forget how to say this because it looks like quay. The key lay directly before them, and beyond it the harbor, the flags of 1,000 ships snapping in the breeze. The hour was late. The quay should have been empty. Instead, it was crowded with troops, row after row of them in gray uniforms, 200 soldiers at least, and every barrel of every gun was pointed directly at them. So, this was not something that Kaz saw coming, because he was, going off of mostly information that Matthias had given him about how things are handled when shit goes left. The different protocols, the different, levels of alarm. And Matthias rightfully is like, listen, I never actually saw Black Protocol engaged. So, no, I didn't know. He wasn't keeping anything from them, in other words. He gave them as much information as he had. But if you have never actually seen something for yourself, you can't know everything. And they have a heart render with him. And obviously this heart render is on Parem. And he is going to be able to kill all of them, no problem. And this is the moment when Nina does some badass shit. Nina is willing to do what she needs to do. She takes Jurda Parem. They all try and stop her because she is going to be addicted and potentially could die just from this one hit of it. And Matthias tries to stop her, and she's like, listen, if I don't do this, all of you are going to die within the next 4 seconds. And if it looks like things are going really bad for me, I'm going to need you to put me out of my misery and do the right thing. And then, without another moment's hesitation, she takes the drug and immediately kills the other heart render. And she does it as she says the words, "be free," which I really liked that moment, because the heart render that she's up against he is emaciated and obviously in terrible, excruciating pain. He's clearly an addict he's enslaved and just being, what's the word I want? Exploited. So as much as I'm sure it pains her to have to kill one of her own people, it's better than what he's going through right now. And the way that this is described after she takes the drug is really kind of cool. She stopped thinking. Her blood began to thrum, and her heart was suddenly pounding. The world broke up into tiny flashes of light. She could see the true color of Matthias's eyes, pure blue beneath the flecks of gray and brown she'd put there, the moonlight gleaming off every hair on his head. She saw the sweat on Kaz's brow, the near-invisible pinpricks of the tattoo on his forearm. She looked out over the lines of Fjerdan soldiers. She could hear their hearts beating. She could see their neurons firing, feel their impulses forming. Everything made sense. Their bodies were a map of cells, 1,000 equations solved by the second, by the millisecond, and she knew only answers. That is pretty rad. And I was a little bummed that just as we have this moment, it cuts from her POV to Matthias's. So, because I wanted to be in her mind, kind of enjoying this moment a little bit more. I think it's a smart idea to not let us get comfortable with that, but it was, I was a little bit like, oh, because we go to Matthias's POV and what he sees as Nina goes out there. Her eyes dilate really dramatically, and he sees her just making these minuscule movements with her hands, but resulting in these devastating effects. It's just, the whole thing is so... She went for the heart render immediately. Nina flicked her wrist, and his eyes exploded in his head. He crumpled without a sound. "Be free," she said. Nina glided towards the soldiers. Matthias moved to protect her as he saw rifles raised. She lifted her hands. "Stop," she said. They froze. "Lay down your arms." As one, they obeyed her. "Sleep," she commanded. Nina swept her hands in an arc, and the soldiers toppled without protest, row after row, stalks of wheat felled by an invisible scythe. Yo, that is intense. Yeah, I can understand, even if there weren't, a physiological effect in her body that resulted in an actual addictive result. Just this power, the accentuation of it, and the reach of it, that would be something to get addicted to on its own. Never mind the actual, your body's chemical reaction to the drug. So they're about to head towards the ship, and there is another group of Driscoll. But they are protected under this weird, kind of armor, which I didn't know this was a thing. They wore masks of dully gleaming gray chainmail over their faces, their features obscured by the mesh. But Matthias recognized Jarl Broom's voice when he spoke. "Traitor," Broom said from behind his mask. "Betrayer of your country and your god, you will not leave this harbor alive. None of you will. Our hoods, our masks, every stitch of clothing we wear is reinforced with Grisha steel. Core cloth, created to our specifications by Grisha fabricators under our control and designed for just this purpose. You cannot force us to your will. You cannot harm us. This game is at an end." So what does Nina do? Nina, like a fucking unstoppable, she's like a tornado. They try and shoot at Matthias, and they hit him, but she heals him before the wound even, there's no time. He doesn't even get to see the wound. It's gone by the time he, lifts his shirt up. They shoot her a lot, and she is wounded, but then she heals herself so quickly. There are so many bullets hitting her, guys, and she is just healing herself, in faster than they can shoot her. It's bananas. I didn't even, the idea of being able to heal herself that fast while she's on this drug never even occurred to me, and that is pretty baller. And then Broom, he continues to say, "Well, your powers can't touch us." And she's like, "Well, no, they can't touch you." And she brings all of the soldiers whom she sent to sleep back awake again, has them walk over to their countrymen and yank the protective coverings off of their heads, and then begins to basically slowly crush their heads. Matthias stops her from killing absolutely all of them. And I normally would really hate the fact that she doesn't just take these people out. But the way that Matthias structures his argument here is pretty amazing and effective. Their screams were a chorus. Klaas, who had drunk too much with him in Avfall. Geert, who had trained his wolf to eat from his hand. They were monsters, he knew it, but boys as well, boys like him, taught to hate, to fear. You know they would not offer you mercy, Matthias. I know, but let them live in shame instead. You taught me to be something better. They could be taught too. They fear you as I once feared you, he said. As you once feared me. We are all someone's monster, Nina. For a long moment she studied his face. At last she dropped her arms, and the ranks of Driscoll crumpled to the ground, whimpering. She released the other soldiers, and they fell back into their slumber, puppets with their strings cut. Then her hand shot out once more, and Broom shrieked. He clapped his hands to his head, blood trickling between his fingers. "He'll live?" Matthias asked. "Yes," she said as she stepped onto the schooner. "He'll just be very bald." Which, that's pretty fun. I like the idea of doing something really obvious physically to let everybody know that you fucked somebody's day right up. If you're not going to kill him, you may as well do something. So I approve. So they get onto this boat and they head out. There's a strong wind, so they're making good time. And Nina is beginning to, she's not beginning to come down quite yet, but she's beginning to try to mentally prepare herself for the coming down, because they all know that this is really dangerous what she did, that she's going to want more of the drug, and that the only hope she has for coming out the other side of this and not being ruined by it is to resist taking any more of it. That first dose is pretty much all she can possibly handle and still manage to come back from it. And it seems, we see her later, and it seems like that has worked. Like, she managed to avoid taking any more, and she has gotten past it. But it's really bad in the meanwhile. Like, she goes from feeling all powerful, this moment of being able to see all of the details of the universe laid out in front of her, like it's such a simple sum, to anything touching her being excruciatingly painful. The silk of her dress is described as crushed glass at one point, which I was like, oh God, that is fucking just yikes, you know? And there's the possibility that they could give her like little doses to help her through the day. And she's just like, no, absolutely not. No more of this. So Inej, for her part, Inej is standing up at the, she has a moment of like commiserating with Nina, which I like. I like the fact that these two are becoming friends. Nina says something about how they should buy the menagerie, and Inej says, yeah, we should buy it and then burn it down. And Nina finally turns to her, and she takes not only the fake menagerie tattoo away, but she also takes away the scar that the menagerie tattoo she had really had left behind when she went and had it removed by some fucking butcher, basically. So, when the prickling faded, the skin of Inej's forearm was perfect, almost too smooth and flawless, like it was the one new part of her. Which I'm like, oh, Nina, can you come here real quick? You do me a little favor, right here, maybe. Just this a little bit. Like, that would be, if I was friends with a heart render on GHAT-DAMN, I would be so selfish. I'd be like, can you tailor this and tailor this and tailor this and this and this? Actually, can you do that for me? That'd be great. Thanks. Because evidently the fact that she's on GHAT-DAMN when she does it means that it may be permanent. So I'll be interested to see what happens with, as we find out, Wylan, because he has been tailored to look exactly like Boyo Baer's son. On the one hand, I want him to look like himself again. On the other hand, I want it to be permanent so that I can maintain this fantasy that Nina could solve all of my problems with the way that I look. So Kaz comes up and Nina's walking by him and he asks her to do something and she looks really irritated. Like she can't believe he wants her to do another thing for him. And we find out later what it is, but in the moment, Inej is just like, are you serious? You're going to make her do something? She's just been through hell. And he's like, and there's still shit to be done. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe Nina would be glad for the distraction. So they talk about, well, really Inej talks about what it was that she wants. She is talking about, learning to sail, using her money to hire a crew and outfit a ship, hunt slavers, yada, yada, yada. I almost pity the slavers, Kaz said. They have no idea what's coming for them. A pleased flush warmed her cheeks. But hadn't Kaz always believed she was dangerous? Inej balanced her elbows on the railing and rested her chin in her palms. I'll go home first, though. And she tries to sort of ask him about whether he has any other family or not, and wants to know what he's planning to do. And he doesn't really open up to her until finally when she talks more about the fact that she's planning on leaving, he says, stay. I want you to stay. I want you. You want me. And how will you have me, Kaz? He looked at her then, eyes fierce, mouth set. It was the face he wore when he was fighting. How will you have me? She repeated. Fully clothed, gloves on, your head turned away so our lips can never touch? He released her hand, his shoulders bunching, his gaze angry and ashamed as he turned his face to the sea. Maybe it was because his back was to her that she could finally speak the words. I will have you without your armor, Kazbrecker, or I will not have you at all. Speak, she begged silently. Give me a reason to stay. For all his selfishness and cruelty, Kaz was still the boy who had saved her. She wanted to believe he was worth saving too. The sails creaked. The clouds parted for the moon, then gathered back around her. Inej left Kaz with the wind howling and dawn still a long while away. I like that, because that line hints at the whole book, in a sense. Dawn is a long while away. There is still so much to be done. And it also sets up that it wouldn't be... I don't want to say that what happens next wouldn't be as interesting if Inej didn't feel about Kaz the way that he feels about her. But it would have been a lot more kind of cringy, I think, if it felt like he was trying to pursue a woman who did not have any interest in him in the hopes that she would eventually come around or begin to care about him. I like that we get this little tidbit where we know for sure that she wants to be with him, but he is going to have to meet her halfway. And then everything falls apart so that his searching for her feels a lot more significant, personally, if that makes sense. So, let's see. We have Nina's thing and her, her pain. We have Jesper. Jesper, what a disaster. First of all, there is a really interesting bit, considering what we find out about Wylan later, where Jesper is talking about how much Wylan understands and knows about chemistry. Jesper hadn't seen Wylan since they'd left the harbor, and he had to admit he missed having the merchling around to annoy. Kuwei seemed friendly enough, but his Kirch was rough, and he didn't seem to like to talk to oh my god, I just fell over my tongue. And he didn't seem to like to talk much. Sometimes he'd just appear on deck at night and stand silently beside Jesper, staring out at the waves. It was a little unnerving. Yeah, how about that, Jesper? And when Jesper thinks about Nina, he's simultaneously impressed at what she's done, and he feels kind of embarrassed because he knows that he is a fabricator, and he knows that there's a chance he could have taken the Jura Parem and also done something to help everybody. But there's, I think, a part of him where he's like, one, doing that, I would have to sort of mentally accept what I am in a really declarative way that I am not ready to do. Also, he'd have to risk himself and be a hero, which he is not really interested in doing. And I just, personally, because of Jesper's reaction to gambling and how he's obviously got a problem. The man has a gambling addiction. He is an addict. I feel like there is no way he'd be able to take the one dose of Gerdaparem and leave it at that. If he had taken it, it would not go for him the way that it goes for Nina. He couldn't have done it. I just don't think he could. He has an addictive personality. And that is a real thing. And I have an addictive personality, 100%. I just watched people around me throughout my life abusing drugs and alcohol. And I determined that I was never going to do that, but I wound up doing it with food instead. I found a way, but I just tried to pick something that wasn't going to absolutely kill me immediately. And I really believe that if you have that kind of personality, you just have to be really careful with what you engage with, because it's something that can sort of sneak up on you. And if you're not honest with yourself about the kind of person you are and the vulnerabilities that you have, it's really easy to look at a perfect example of somebody being able to do something in moderation and fool yourself into thinking you can be that person when you know that's not who you are. And that's not, when I say it, it sounds like I'm just some people are just better than others. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I think that there are some of us who fall into a habit and and want a crutch of a specific type much more easily than other people. And I think that there's a genetic component to that. I think that there is a component in terms of how you were raised. I think there's a lot of factors. And Jesper obviously is already struggling with some shit, and he does not need to add something with the power of Gerdaparem on top of it. We also get a little moment of Kaz talking about how he ran into Pekka Rollins, and Jesper asking himself, what is it that he told him? I hope it's not too much. And we wind up because I thought for a second, is Jesper a fucking traitor? Which, if he were, that would have been too much. It would have, because we've been in his head, and there's no reason for him not to think about the fact that he's betrayed everybody. But instead, it's a much more sort of benign stupidity, where he's got creditors on his back, and he lets them know that he's going to be out of town for a while, but he's planning to come into a lot of money, which basically gives away that there's something big going down, and they're able to follow the trail and figure out exactly what the deal is, which kind of fucks everybody up. So yeah, Wylan is allegedly left on the ship because Kaz doesn't want Wylan to be they don't want to show their hand too soon to Van Eck that they have his son, which we find out is not exactly true, but it's a pretty good ploy at this point. So they head out to meet Van Eck, and I was on edge so much because I was just why this seems wrong. The fact that they're meeting where they are, it didn't really, I think it was one of those things where I didn't have enough time to really formulate the thought. But Van Eck is allegedly supposed to represent the Merchants Guild, and yet he's not meeting them somewhere official. And I sort of I think there was this niggling feeling that something about this didn't feel right. But then I was well, maybe they don't want everybody to know that they associated with Kaz for this job. And so they're doing this on the DL because of that. So I sort of as I was reading, there were little alarm bells going off, but I was able to explain them away quickly enough that it didn't really sink in. I was expecting the box that they opened to be maybe like loaded with explosives and not have money in it at all. It turns out it does have money. I don't know why these guys brought the actual money with them, but it wasn't necessary, as it turns out, because they're just planning on killing all of them and taking the kid that they want. And this whole thing is really sad. So Van Eck, it turns out, he had been sending letters to his son begging him to come home, right? If you're reading this, you know how much I wish to have you back home. But the thing is, his son can't read. And as much as Wylan is obviously brilliant, as much as Wylan can do equations and chemistry and all kinds of other things that are incredibly difficult, he can't read. So it turns out all the letters that he sent were mocking his son. Rather than expressions of actual affection, they were meant to be a poke at the fact that he knows his son can't read any of the letters he sent. Reminders, basically, of why his son was kicked out of the house. Because he has disowned him and gotten his wife pregnant again and intends for the new child to be the heir, no matter whether it's a boy, girl, or as he puts it, born with horns. So, you know, he says, where I'm going to try and find the exact moment where he talks about this. Let's see. Let me tell you about my son. He was meant to be heir to one of the greatest fortunes in all of Kerch. He can paint and play the flute most prettily. What my son cannot do is read. I finally had to accept that Gezin saw fit to curse me with a moron for a child. Wylan is a boy who will never grow to be a man. He is a disgrace to my house. He is a mistake, one soon to be corrected. My lovely young wife is carrying a child, be it boy or girl or creature with horns. That child will be my heir, not some soft-pated idiot who cannot read a hymnal, let alone a ledger. Not some fool who would make the Van Eck name a laughingstock. You're the fool, Jesper snarled. He's smarter than most of us put together, and he deserves a better father than you. Deserved, amended Van Eck. He blew the whistle twice. So, the fucking tide makers smash the ship that he believes Wylan and Nina are on. It turns out Wylan is not on the ship because he is right next to them. And it turns out that Nina has been secreted away. Secreted? Secreted is to, like, exude a substance. Secreted is to hide a thing. She has been secreted away in an abandoned tower of the prison to kind of get over what's happened with the Parem. And she is with the actual son of Boyo-Bayor. I love this moment where he finds out, you need Kuwe Bo to do it. And how will you take him from me? You're outgunned and surrounded. I don't need to take him from you. You never had him. That is not Kuwe Bo. A sorry bluff at best. I'm not big on bluffing, am I, Inej? Not as a rule. Van Eck's lip curled. And why is that? Because he'd rather cheat, said the boy, who was not Kuwe Bo, in perfect, unaccented Kerch. Van Eck startled at the sound of his voice, and Jesper flinched. The shoe boy held out a hand. Pay up, Kaz. Kaz sighed. I do hate to lose a wager. You see, Van Eck, Wylan bet me that you would have no qualms about ending his life. Call me sentimental, but I didn't believe a father could be so callous. I enjoy this a lot, that even as much as Kaz sees the worst in people and is a really, cynical person, he's still had more faith in Van Eck than his own son did. That's really, that is some shit. And I like it because, we all want to believe that parents are better than they are if we are on the outside. If we're on the inside, that is definitely also true. But it's the sort of thing where if you hear a child talking about how their parent ain't shit, you often assume that that child is biased in some way because they didn't get what they wanted as a kid, that they were expecting too much, that they, don't have the perspective of age or the full understanding of different circumstances, yada, yada, yada. It's really hard for us to accept when a kid says that their parent is trash, that they're accurate. And this kid fucking knows his dad is trash, man. He just do. It's so much that he's willing to bet against Kaz Brekker. It's just a really sad and funny moment in its way. And it turns out that the only reason that Nina was able to tailor him so well is because she was using the parem. Otherwise he wouldn't have looked almost as identical to Kuwei Yulbo. It doesn't really matter if he looks identical or not to Van Eck because he's never seen this kid before. But it is important that he not look like his son, and that way he doesn't recognize him. Also, it's important that this kid look as much like Yulbo to fool Jesper, both because as a reader, we need to be surprised, and therefore Jesper needs to not know what's going on, and also because Kaz, as it turns out, knows already that Jesper kind of screwed him and decided to punish him a little bit by making him think that Wylan was dead for a split second, which is really fucking harsh, but there it is. So let us, he says, where is Kuwei Yulbo? Let us safely off this island with our payment, and I'll gladly tell you. Everybody, what Van Eck decides to do is he tells his guards to kill everybody but Brekker. And rather than keep his cool the way that he normally does, Kaz looks over at Inej. This moment is pretty awful because it's one of those things that as he says, he knows exactly when he made his mistake, but you can't fix it. You just have to think about it and regret it for all time. Kaz knew the instant he made his mistake. They'd all known it might come down to this. He should have trusted his crew. His eyes should have stayed trained on Van Eck. Instead, in that moment of threat, when he should have only thought of the fight, he looked at Inej. And Van Eck saw it. He blew on his whistle. Leave the others, get the money and the girl. Yeah, so the Tide Makers all fucking jump on Inej and grab her. They are able to take some of them out by shooting them. They're doing all kinds of shit, but there are too many of them and they are coordinated and they are, they're overpowered right now because of this fucking parem. And they can basically fly. So they can grab her and just sail up out of reach. And killing her when she's up in the air, or killing them, they will drop her and she can fall to her death. So there comes a point where they can't, defend her anymore. It's really awful. You have 1 week to bring me the real Kuwei, Van Eck shouted, or they'll hear that girl's screams all the way back in Fjerda. And if that still doesn't move you, I'll let it be known that you're harboring the most valuable hostage in the world. Every gang, government, smuggler, and spy will be after you in the dregs. You'll have nowhere to hide. So, this is such a bummer. I feel so bad for fucking Kaz. He fell for this shit again, man, Let's see, I'm trying to find them. Kaz marveled at his own stupidity. Dumber than a pigeon fresh off the boat and looking to make a fortune on East Stave. His greatest vulnerability had been right beside him, and now she was gone. Jesper was staring at Wylan, his eyes roving over the black hair, the golden eyes. Why? He said at last. Why would you do this? We needed leverage. That's Kaz's voice talking. I couldn't let you all walk into a hostage exchange thinking I was some kind of insurance. Yeah, that's a good point. And he says something about, like, because Wylan's finally like, why does this bother you so much? And Jesper says, I don't know, maybe I liked your stupid face. You knew, Wylan knew, Inej knew, everybody but me. Ask me why, Jesper, Kaz said, his patience at an end. Jesper shifted uneasily on his feet. Why? You were the one who sold us out to Pekka Rollins. You're the reason we were ambushed when we tried to leave GHAT-DAMN. You almost got us all killed. I didn't tell Pekka Rollins anything. You told one of the dime lions you were leaving Kirch, but that you'd be coming into big money, didn't you? I had to. They were leaning on me hard. My father's farm. I told you not to tell anyone you were leaving the country. I warned you to keep your mouth shut. I didn't have a choice. You had me locked up in the Crow Club before we left. If you'd let you what? Play a few hands of three-man bramble? Dig yourself deeper in with every boss in the barrel stupid enough to extend you credit? You told a member of Pekka's gang you were about to be flush. I didn't know we'd go to Pekka, or that Pekka knew about Parem. I was just trying to buy myself some time. Saints, Jesper, you really haven't learned anything in the dregs, have you? You're still the same dumb farm boy who stepped off the boat. So they start to get into a fight, and Matthias has to separate the two of them. But yeah, it's like, Jesper, you're frustrating, man. You are. You're a good shot. You're good-hearted in most ways, but dude, that fucking vulnerability is rough. So this is when Kaz starts to get his scheming face back. And he comes up with an idea on what he's going to do to get Nina back. And then we go to the final chapter, which is from Pekka Rollins' perspective. And I love this because I have said it before. I keep forgetting how young everybody is. And Pekka's looking at everybody here, calling them kids in his head, which you would 100% would. I certainly fucking would. They're like 16, 17 years old, all of them. They wore costumes of the comedy brute, or brute, I'm not sure how you say, but no one got access to his office without showing his face, so the masks had come off. He recognized some of them. He'd hoped to recruit the heartrender Nina Zenick at some point, but now she looked like she might not last out the month. All jutting bones, dark hollows, and trembling hands. Seemed he'd dodged a bad investment there. She leaned against a giant Fjerdan with a shaved head and grim blue eyes. Shaved head. Interesting. He was huge, probably former military. Good muscle to have around. The boy next to them was Shu, but he looked far too young to be the scientist they'd all been so desperate to get their hands on. Besides, Brecker would never bring such a prize to the Emerald Palace. And then, of course, Rollins knew Jesper Fahey. The sharpshooter had run up an astonishing amount of debt at nearly every gambling den on East Stave. His loose talk had put Rollins wise to the knowledge that Brecker was sending a team to Fjerda. A little digging and a lot of bribes had yielded the where and when of their departure. Intelligence that had proved faulty. Brecker had been one step ahead of him and the dime lions. The little canal rat had managed to make it to the ice court after all. And it turns out like it's a good thing because Rollins was locked up, and we never saw what Kaz did, and I had assumed that he killed him, but it turns out that he let him go, and now it turns out to be a good thing. He let him go, I think, because killing him without getting to savor it in a prison was not how Kaz wanted this to go down. And it wouldn't have ensured, I think, that Kaz could take his place, which I think is ultimately Kaz's goal. But this moment here, it turns out that Kaz is here to ask Brekka for money. And he's not asking for a loan. He just wants the money. And he is willing to sell his shares in his business. Where is it? Let's see. My shares in the Crow Club and Fifth Harbor. And finally, Brecker agrees. At first, he's just like, get the fuck out of here. And then he sort of hears him out and is like, well, maybe. Okay. When I come for Van Eck, I won't just take what's mine. I'll carve his life hollow. I'll burn his name from the ledger. There will be nothing left. Pekka Rollins couldn't count the threats he'd heard, the men he'd killed, or the men he'd seen die, but the look in Brecker's eye still sent a chill slithering up his spine. Some wrathful thing in this boy was begging to get loose, and Rollins didn't want to be around when it slipped its leash. I like that line a lot. Like it's this whole other creature. So he decides to give them the money, and they leave, and it turns out that they fucking robbed him at the same time. He's missing his pocket watch. He's missing his wallet. He's missing the gold buckles on his shoes, the tie pin, a coin pendant that he wore for luck. Fucking everything is gone. No one got one over on Pekka Rollins. No one dared. But Brecker had, and Rollins wondered if that was just the beginning. Dodie, he said, I think we'd best say a prayer for Jan Van Eck. You think Brecker can best him? It's a long shot, but if he's not careful, I think that merch might walk himself right onto the gallows and let Brecker tighten the noose. We better hope Van Eck kills that boy. Why? Because otherwise I'll have to. Rollins straightened the knot of his pinless tie and headed towards the casino floor. The problem of Kaz Brecker could wait to be solved another day. Right now, there was money to be made. And that is the end of the book, y'all. So Pekka Rollins is like in on this deal. And he doesn't remember who Kaz is at all. And I love that detail that when Kaz asks, do you know who I am? In the prison, and he responds with, yeah, you keep stealing my business. Kaz looks so hateful at him because he's so angry that Pekka doesn't remember who he fucked over. He doesn't mean anything to him. And when he says again this time, you still don't remember me, do you? And Pekka says, should I? And Kaz just says, not yet. And I'm like, I just can't wait for Kaz to dick Pekka over. I can't wait, y'all. So, thank you very much, Megan, for commissioning the remainder of this book. I'm excited that I got to finish it, but I'm dying because even though they got out alive, they did not get what they were owed. So I'm hoping that this next book they do. We shall see. And I am worried about Inej. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm not excited about it. So yeah, guys, thank you all again so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the coverage, and I will see you very soon with the beginning of Crooked Kingdom. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.